When I started filming the previous video, I didn't quite expect it to blow up like it did. We hit, I think it was 30,000 views or something, and well, to be honest, I was only making the video for one of my friends, maybe two, so I didn't have to go through all of my setup over again in text forms. So I think it was just a blessing that it actually blew up, and it really showed that people are interested in seeing some videos on NeoVim and maybe some development setups and actual setup walkthroughs, if that's what you can call them. And to hop into this video's actual topic, we are going to be looking at how I develop Java applications with NeoVim. How do I run tests inside the editor? How do I maybe test some of the REST endpoints without even opening up the browser, and all that jazz. And let's just go straight into the actual editor here. So I did some tests here. Let's just close those out so we don't leak anything yet. And you might remember the development setup from last time. I might actually put some screen keys on this time so we can actually see something, and also we might be zooming in a little bit so you won't have to watch this on a huge monitor at home. And to start the walkthrough of my editor, let's just see how it works. So I have a bootstrapped Quarkus application here, so you have the regular Java file structure here. And when you open it up, we are greeted by a nice refreshing color scheme. It's the same color scheme in the previous video. For anybody interested, it's called Pinkmare. If I just find it here, you can install Pinkmare editor theme by using the editor installation tool of your choice and installing the Matsu/Pinkmare theme. It should have quite good support for color schemes. It supports 3-seater, mostly at least, so it should have a great development experience for you. So we have this Java application here, and we just have a regular old controller here for us. And as we might see from the bottom here, we have our service ready, which means that our LSP has started up. We are using the JDTLS LSP, which can be seen here, which is by, I think it's from Oracle or something, but it's actually pretty nice. We are using a couple more plugins on top of that, but we can get into those a bit later on. To start it, we can see that we have just a normal controller here. We can write Java here, and we have all of these, we have all of the completions that we might need in Java land, and we also have the actual descriptions of the methods we are calling. And even when we are writing the function itself, we can ask for the signature help by, I have it bound to Control K. So when I am working with something that has multiple params, I can just Control K and I will get the next param in line. And since we are using the NeoVim LSP, we also get the virtual text giving us the error statements, which is really nice. And we can get the explanations of those. Well, I have it as SE, show error, but you can bind anywhere you want. So if we want to write this code and we want to call the endpoint, we have a couple of choices here. The first choice, of course, is by using a web browser, and we can see that we get our hello Matsu there. But if we want to actually live in Vim, we might want to do something else. I'll open up my node tree here, and we can create a file called a REST file, and we can name it hello.http. And we can use them if you have ever used something like Visual Studio Code. And you might be familiar with REST files or HTTP files. In this we can just write HTTP requests like we would on regular environments. And I have 8 bound to leader RR, REST request or something I guess. And it will just do the REST request for us. And we can see that it's returning a 200 and hello Matsuan there. And we were to update this to hello YouTube, we can see immediately it being updated. And there was some laggy stuff here. I don't know what's going on with that. I have kind of switched away from this tool. But also, as we are using Tmux, we can see our Quarkus running here, and we can see our console logs being displayed there. So when I usually develop with Java, I have 1 or maybe sometimes 2 Vim tabs on my Tmux setup, and on top of that I have the application running in one of the Tmux windows here. If I were to actually want to look at the logs right next to my editor, I might open it into a split, but for most of the cases I'm just happy with having it in a different window here. And if we were to develop something in here, for example, if we want to return the current date, we would of course make an endpoint for it. And as we can see, the LSP is really fast, so even when writing something like Java, we can write it quite fast. And if we were to return a, well, let's just create a object for it, because why not? Well, actually, yeah, let's start with a string. So we make a endpoint that gives us the time. Let's give the path as time and make it return local date .now. Well, we will if we would have selected the whole thing from our completions, we would have gotten the auto imports like we get in a lot of languages. But in cases where we don't get the imports automatically, we can either go on top of the error and press on code actions. For me, code actions is leader enter, and I can see that I could import the local date from java.time or pretty much anything here that is available, and we can do it that way, and we can see that we got it imported here. But another way I can do it is through using one of the plugins that is special for Java development, called NeoVim JDTLS, which kind of gives us these powerful key bindings to get these cumbersome Java actions a bit less cumbersome. Well, there's a great action in that package called organize imports, which also handles your imports that are missing. So I have it bound to leader OI, which is, well, organize imports. And if I press leader OI, I can see that it automatically imported local date for me. If there was a clash in the packages, for example, there was multiple types of dates. For example, if I want to use date itself and I would press OI, it would ask me which version of the package I want to import, and when I choose it, it will put it there nicely. Now we are getting a error here, but now that we have our endpoint there, we could try to use it with the same HTTP file we have here. So we could do hello time space RR, and we are getting that the parsing is not nice because we are telling it that it's JSON even though it's not JSON, it's text plain. And with Quarkus, development is really fast. As you can see, this is Java, and I have not had to build stuff at all. It's a hot reloading development environment. So if you haven't heard of Quarkus, I really suggest you look into it. It's something that works with a lot of the, if you have ever worked with Java EE, so the Jaxaris bindings or anything enterprisey, you should be at home with Quarkus. It's pretty much the same specs they are following with a lot of the libraries, and it makes development a lot faster, and a lot smaller packages come out of Quarkus than, for example, using something like Wildfly and RestEasy. But as we can see, we have our time here, and we can immediately be requesting it from our HTTP files. So developing Java applications in Vim is quite possible and quite chill actually. It's a nice experience here. And if we were to go into some real examples here, we might have some endpoint that we would create that would actually produce a application JSON. Actually, let's go back a bit. So how about then when we want to do the every enterprise developer's favorite thing, which is test-driven development? Well, Quarkus nicely gave us a nice example of a API test that we can use. And if you want to run this, well, that's where one of the libraries that I'm using with NeoVim comes in. It's called, let's cheat a bit. It's called, let's see, JDTLS. It's called the NeoVim JDTLS. In this situation also, it also utilizes the NeoVim DApp and a little bit of the NeoVim DApp UI. I'm not actually sure if I use this library anymore. I need to look into it. But what the JDTLS library does is, I already lost it. It gives us a lot of Java bindings, and if we go to my JDTLS setup, it's quite hefty. It has a lot of setting up. But once you have it set up, you should be at rest. You don't really have to do anything after that. But once you have it all set up, you can create a lot of good bindings. We can see the organize imports binding that we used earlier, and then there's also a extract method binding, extract variable binding, and a couple of different versions for them depending on if we are on visual mode or normal mode. Let's actually show those right now. So if we were to have a function like this and we want to extract it into a variable, I can just press leader EV, extract variable, and it asks me which part of it I want to extract. Let's just extract the whole thing, and we can see that it's already extracted into a variable, and it's also refactored it so the use cases are using the variable instead of the raw thing there. Then we can just rn, for me it's rn rename, it uses the LSP to rename the thing, so we can name it to, for example, date now, and we have a nicely refactored pattern here, not returning the raw value if we, for example, want to be logging it before sending it out. And the same thing goes for if we want to extract into a method. We could do em. Let's see, actually, was it the extract method? Yes, extract method. So if we, for example, want to extract this into a method, we could go em. Okay, I misclicked, I think. Space em, and we have it extracted there into another function. And then we could just rename it to get current date, and we have a nicely refactored method here, just using the NeoVim JDTLS packages functions that utilize the LSP itself. What else do we have here? We have extract constant. For example, if we have something that we are using plainly, like for example here, we could just do extract constant, and we have the constant already extracted. So all we have to do was space EC, and we have all of that extracted into a variable because we don't want any magical strings in our code. So these are just some of the bindings that I've set up. There's a lot more in JDTLS package, but these are the ones I use most. Then there's a visual mode sector for it and everything. But getting back into the actual tests, I have two functions here. I have test method and test class, and those are pretty much what you would expect. So if we have this endpoint here and we want to run the tests that Quarkus has provided us, I could just go tc space tc, and it would open up a window that runs the Quarkus code machine, and it shows that it went wrong. And if we want to have more information, we could just open the debug window, so space do, debugger open, and we can see here that this is the test that failed, and then we can have the trace of what failed actually. We have the stack trace there, but the actual meat of it is here. So we were expecting a hello REST-DC, and we have yellow YouTube, which is because we changed it. We have also two windows on the right. We have the stacks window and the scopes window in case we were using a debugger in this. For this one, we aren't using a debugger, but if we would fix this code, so if we would just fix it like this, it has an exclamation mark, and then run test class again, we can see that the test container starts up, and at the bottom of our editor we can see tests finished versus printer to DAF REPL, all ones succeeded. And if we open the debugger, we can see that the tests that succeeded have been marked with a check mark. And if we had like multiple tests here, it's just pretty much copy this test a couple of times because I'm a bit lazy here. If you only want to test one of these methods, we would put our cursor inside this method and just run tm test method. It does the same thing, but we can see that all ones succeeded, so it only ran one of the tests. And if we were to run tc test class, we can see in that case that all three tests succeeded, so we can run pretty much any amount of tests we really want to be running. How about when we want to be writing these tests? If you saw me scrolling through the NeoVim JDTLS configuration, I have a couple of favorite static members here. For example, I like to use the Hamcrest matchers, so those are pretty much like what the favorite static members here mean is that those are recommended by the JDTLS when I am using them straight up without having them imported into the project. So it prioritizes those on top of other completions. So if we want to see that in action, we could write a actual like a TDD style test here. So if we were to, for example, remove this method for now, we would run create a test here, and we would just go public void test get time endpoint, and we just mark it as a test. So if we were to write a unit test for our get time endpoint, we would of course start it with given, which is the rest assured way of writing tests, and then we can use some syntactic sugar with when, and we get the hello time endpoint, and let's just do like the MVP of this test case. So we want it to return 200, and since we erased it, if we were to run this test now, the window here looks a bit prettier when you have like a bit smaller of a font. So, and you can modify the windows also, so it doesn't have to look that cramped as it does now. But as we can see, we have our tests failing, and we can see that it's failing because it's a 404 instead of a 200. And let's just fix that real quick. So we create the endpoint in our Java class. We make it return text, and we make it into a nice function, and then we want it to return just anything really. We are going with the red-green refactoring, which means that we are making the minimal effort to make the test pass. Let's see why it's not passing. We see that we forgot to give it the path time, and it's not the correct endpoint. And if we were to run it again, the test containers in Quarkus are really fast. Like, we are starting up a whole container that runs the Java application, and then it does the test against the actual application. So you are actually doing quite like a integration test instead of a unit test here. But as you can see, it's really fast, and it does scale largely also. And it also works with something that uses a DB, because they can just run to DB in a test container too. And we see that our tests are passing here. Let's make it so that it actually returns the right thing. So we want it to be returning a string that is the current date. So let's see. We want the body to match our requirements, and we want to use the is variable. And here we can see the Hamcrest static favorite members here, because we are getting pretty much given the Hamcrest libraries is matchers as the first options here, which is really nice, so we can write the tests without having to wonder where we are importing them from. Next up, we want to make sure that it's returning, well, this isn't the test you would actually like write, but let's write for now, because we know that the current date is 2022, the 5th of June. We can make sure that it runs this test. We can see that it's failing because we are not returning the date in itself. We are just returning an empty string. And if we were to fix this, we of course want to make it run correctly. We can use the now and to string, and we have it. We can test it again. And if we test again, we see that all ones succeeded. And then we can, because we have tests that are making sure that anything works, we can easily refactor this. We saw the extract method thing earlier. Well, let's use that. We want to be extracting this into its own method, and we have extracted it, and we can rename it as get current date. And after we have done that, we can run the unit tests for the whole class here, and we can see that all of our tests are passing. And that's pretty much how I do a lot of my Java development. And well, maybe one thing that I would want to showcase more here is that, for example, often you are creating functions that are not yet created on your project. So if we created a greeting service, which is it's just a service class for our research class. Yep. And we made it, for example, request scoped, and then we want to have a function there, so we want to move this function into the other class. We could of course inject the service first, and then we could make it so that the service has this method, and we have the error that the method is undefined in the service. Well, if we were to run a code action here, we are getting the suggestion that we could create the method in there, and if we create it and go to definition, we can see that the method is already created in this end. So we can create functions into the class that we are expecting it to be in quite easily here, and we can then just save the file, and we are set to write the actual test here. So we can now just write the same case we wrote there and make it work nicely. Again, refactoring it step by step. And if we were to go into our tests and run the test file again, we can see that we are getting a success on all of our tests. Making the test-driven development, even on APIs, quite uncumbersome. Of course, all of the other LSP stuff also applies, so we have go-to references, we can immediately jump there, we can get signatures on everything, and if you have the NeoVim JDTLS installed, you can even go into the decompiled library representation. So if, for example, you're wondering what kind of media types there are, you can just jump there and browse through it. Or, for example, if you had a list object and you were using it, let's organize imports and put them. We could, of course, go into the ArrayLists method class here, or if we were interested in like what ArrayLists, for example, last index of function did, we could just jump there and read the documentation here. because I think reading it here is a lot better than reading it from this abomination of a window. So I really like to jump into the definition and actually see the actual documentation on the function. I use it quite a lot. One place, for example, where I use it a lot is when I am doing tests. I want to use the actual HTTP status markings. I don't know what to call them, but like the actual classes, so they're not magic numbers like 200. And here we can just jump here and see all of the REST statuses that you can pretty much get, which is nice because you can then just go through the documentation in the source file instead of having to look it up anywhere else. You don't really have to leave your editor at all. I'm also a bit sad that there's I'm a little teapot interest in the core library, so boo for that. But yeah, I think that was about it. I hope this was a good thorough view on how I write things on Vim, on Java, and I use this pretty much every day, if not for work, for hobby projects, and I have been enjoying it. I will be linking most of the libraries that I use in the description, but a big shout out to this dude. This dude made it possible to make Java development on NVim so smooth. The NVim JDTLS library is written by him and some contributors, and also the NVim DApp library is written by them, I think, also. So a big shout out to this guy. But if you have any questions, I would gladly answer them in the comments, and I hope this was a good thorough view of how I do stuff in Vim when working with languages like Java. Until next time, see ya.